And we're live. Well, welcome back everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show. Tonight's going to be just looks like me and T for the time, unless
Howdy.
some other people start to roll in, but we'll go from there. Well, so where do you think we should start this one?
Well, do you have any jobs or situations you wanted to debrief or share?
Um let's see. Well, actually, I guess I can share. I'll talk about my last one, and it'll be more of talking about blunders and where I screwed up, where it went wrong, and why. I feel like that might be a good one to talk about.
Okay. You already know, so you have both sides of the story, or are we gonna unpack it?
Yeah, I pretty much already know. It was the one that I talked to you last about, the air quality lead,
Oh, okay.
and so But I guess to kind of start from the beginning, to kind of go over kind of how this kind of came about, what happened, where it went wrong, and how it plays out. Um, it started with I had a referral from someone I'd done work with before, and I know they kind of fall more into probably the raving fan category. So I knew it was a strong referral. Uh, and the main complaint was they have a house that they don't currently live in. It's a rental, but their daughter, her husband, and their grandkid live in it. And the problem was they had remodeled the house. They had inherited it from a family member, and it had severe moisture problems. When they moved in, there was a lot of mold. They had to clean up the mold, do a lot of work there. They did a lot of work to mitigate water from being under the house, but they still had high humidity, and they needed to do something about it. So, uh, it I sold them a comfort consult that started. It sold from the phone. It was basically okay. Well, for these situations, I typically offer the comfort consult. Explained what it was. She said, "Yes, let's do that." Um, uh, First mistake is I just kind of rather than asked for like an upfront contract. I basically just kind of stated, "Hey, this is typically how it goes. You and hopefully your spouse can be there. I like to have both the decision makers there. And if the people that live there, if we could line up a time to where they could be there as well, that would be the best. So then that way I can get as much information as possible, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't explicitly say, you need to be there. And so I kind of just made the assumption with, stating that's what needs to happen. uh, I told them, "Hey, I'll be sending you a prep email that'll kind of explain what's going to happen. So then that way you know ahead of time. Here's what to expect. Uh, you'll know kind of some of the ground rules, and we'll know some things that kind of need to be had up front. So that way we can, be as efficient with our time as possible." And so sent them that email, and we did it pretty quick too, because they were like I mean, they said they were really needing to fix it quickly. So I was like, okay, well, how about this? I'll get out. I had something lined up for the next day, but it was something that wasn't urgent. I said, well, let me get back with you. I'll see if I can move some stuff around. I'll try to get out the very next day, which was a Friday. Uh, so that it worked out, was able to get out Friday. I get out there, and the first thing is I text them before I leave, and I'm like, headed that way, ETA 20 minutes, whatever it was. Uh, and she goes, okay, my husband will be there, and my daughter should be there for a little bit. So it was kind of like, well, not exactly what's supposed to happen, but okay, we'll see, go from there. I get there. Uh, and, talk to the people that's there. Come to find out, the daughter's got to leave in 30 minutes. Her husband, who also lives there, has got to leave in like 45 minutes. But the husband of the decision maker, he's going to be there the whole time. And she wasn't the lady. There was a lady that I spoke to. She wasn't there. So already out the gate, this is where the first mistake took place. Or actually, the first mistake wasn't being explicit with who needs to be there. The second mistake was not going. Oh, uh, everyone that's here is not, or who needs to be here isn't here, and of the people that are here, they're going to be leaving too soon. So we just need to reschedule this. Uh, I didn't do that. I thought, well, we will try to get through the interview portion of them while they're here, and move on to the next stuff, and then I can do the testing when they're not here, and I can deal with the husband who's going to be the decision maker and kind of on some of those things is the more critical person to have. So I thought. So uh did that. Oh,
So
so
what you're telling me is that if people get soft on finding out who all of the necessary players are for the first visit for the comfort consult, um, then things will be very hard to pull back together. And
yes.
I think getting everybody's email so that you can send them all the what to expect email,
Mhm.
and then also say this isn't going to be a sales visit, this is going to be a diagnostics visit. So I really need all the affected parties and all the decision makers present, because
Yes.
we're going to have a conversation so that I understand exactly where all of the pieces lie.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so what this is really a great debrief, because what ends up happening is some people don't realize the importance of this, and the process is sacred. And then other people, over time you get pretty good at what you're doing, and sometimes you lose sight when people spin off like this, because you're good enough that you're usually able to pull it back together. So, and
Yes.
in this case, Tanner's done enough of these that he probably, that was what he figured, is that he's comfortable enough doing comfort consults that he'd be able to pull it back together when he got together with these folks. Anyway, go
Yes.
ahead, continue with the story.
Yes, that's definitely what was happening. It was kind of like, okay, I seen it falling apart, and kind of a critical part of this isn't so much that there's like it's not just that there's a process and you need to follow it step by step. It's that when things start to unravel that way, you start to lose control of this, and when you lose control, that's when things go haywire. And so I was losing control at this point, and I recognized that I was losing control. The only the problem was that I assumed I'm the okay, well, the husband's going to be there, and so as long as I have him, I can pull this back together, and then I can touch base with the rest of them with a follow up visit, and then I can tie this all back together. Uh, Under normal circumstances, I would have probably been right, and I would probably been able to do it no problem. But there was a curveball, which I'll get into next. And so we start the comfort consult. I'm getting a good bit of pain out of the people that live there. I'm getting basically nothing but what's what would be a good word to describe it? Just reluctance and frustration out of the husband decision maker. Uh, it it took about 30 minutes in, I quickly realized that he couldn't care less about any of it. He was like, he's mad that he even has to be there, is what he kind of he's almost to that point where he feels like that he doesn't
In
even want to be there.
hindsight, it seems like he'd spent as much time trying to sort that house out as he wanted to, and he'd rather just be rid of the house.
Yes. Yes. And so, uh, and so that was the real problem, is because if had his attitude would have been different to where he was still invested in the house and is actually it has
Trying to fix
just
it.
a little bit of incentive of wanting to fix the house. it could have been pulled back in, no problem. But it's just that he was so disconnected and out of touch that once I mean, the other two, I was able to get pain out of them, but they're not the decision makers. They're not the one forking over the money. Now they are related to him,
Right.
uh,
His
but
kids, kid
his
and
level of
grandkid.
yeah, but his level of I don't care was so much was that he's like, even though my kids live here, I don't care. It
Well, he
doesn't
may
matter.
also have been dubious that spending more money was going to get more result because he'd been disappointed so many times.
Yes, that, and there's always some people who they feel like they already have it figured out, and those types of people, if their mind is already preset on something else, uh, you can't change their mind directly. And so when you're having to just, talk to them directly, that's where it just kind of falls apart. And that's what happened there. Is it started to fall apart. The more I would try to, ask questions, reverse, and get something out of him, the more it was just I don't care, like that. And so went through the comfort consult, uh, and uh, basically uncovered, all the things that needed to uncover to see what the things that might need to happen, uh, and put together the report. The next problem is that I got the report, got it sent to him, and I was gonna go ahead and go, hey, I'm sending you your report. What day do I need to come out so we can have a follow up visit to go over this report and see what to do next? And so I got that scheduled, got it lined up. uh, when I finally got everyone there for the review, uh, I think. Well, actually, let me rewind. Another key point was during the during the consult towards the end, we do a little exercise where we try to get a budget out of them, and I was actually able to get a $10,000 budget out of him because the husband decision maker, he was the only one that was still there. I was able to get a $10,000 budget out of him.
I remember you saying you were surprised that he was that invested. He was that
Yes,
willing to go that deep, which
yes,
also goes back to the point of it wasn't so much a money thing for him anymore. It was just that he didn't like that house.
yeah. That, and I mean, I don't think it was a real budget in hindsight. I think it was I'm asking questions. I'm like, hey, you don't have to give this to me, but it helps me to kind of tailor these packages that I'm going to put together for you for recommendations around what kind of budget that you're anticipating, or whatever it's worth it to you. If you don't give me one, I'll just have to make assumptions, and therefore you might get a couple of packages that are not even in the realm of what you would even want to consider.
In this case, probably just showing up with a whole bunch of a la carte items would have been
Yeah,
a better call.
yeah. And so he gives me a $10,000 budget. So I build the report around that $10,000 budget that he gave. The packages ended up being a DIY option that was going to be around 3 grand. Uh, there was 4 packages in
What was
total.
the
The next,
DIY option for
uh,
encapsulating the crawl space? Or
no, it was going to be bath fans, attic hatch, uh, filter fans, and portable dehumidifiers.
oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then the next step was going to be to do a whole house dehumidifier with filter fans, the same DIY air sealing, so on and so forth. And so, and that came out to be, let me think, 7,500, 7,600, somewhere in there. And then the next step was going to be that plus a big airdrop with a uh, improved filtration, use a large media filter, and then the last option was going to be adding on fresh air along with all that. So there's 4 different levels. The price ranges went 3,000, around 7,500, around 9,000, and around 11,000. So uh, all over their budget range. Well,
Mhm.
send the report out, uh, deliver it. We go out for the follow up visit, and as we start going over the first thing, and this was another I already knew this at this point, but you could tell that he was going to be even worse with her around. in where
Oh.
I said, hey, you know,
Oh, so he was pissed that she did that, and so with her there, he was going full passive aggressive?
yes, yes,
Okay.
because I had my tablet out, I opened up the report, and I was like, you know, did you get a chance to look through the report? And she's like, yeah, I did, but he didn't. I go, oh, okay. Well, while we kind of talk about some of these other things, would you like? And I was turning my tablet around and go, you know, would you like to read it? And he just like immediately goes, nah, I'm good.
Okay.
And that was it. So I was like, okay, I'm no longer going to talk to you anymore. I will talk to her.
Right.
And so, so I continue. We go through it, and I go, okay, well, before we start, you know, after you've read it, was there anything that stuck out to you that you know needed like clarification on, or do you have any like immediate questions? And she goes, well, I really don't understand it. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, what part is it of it that you don't understand? She's like, all of it. So then I was like, okay. Well, this is a first. Never had somebody not
Mhm.
understand the report at all. But you know, maybe I need to explain it better. Probably, maybe I didn't explain it well. And so I start kind of, you know, going over some of the things, and it quickly become apparent that she didn't read this report. She
Oh,
she opened up the email. She didn't even read part of the email because I included other stuff like quotes in there that she didn't even know was there. Uh, and we started going over some of this stuff. So then it was like, oh, okay, well, this is the problem of when you deliver a report to somebody who didn't go through the comfort consult with you. So it's like that, you know, old
yeah,
problem just kind of sticking out going,
exacerbated. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to just I'm not going to read this report and spend 2 hours going over this point by point. At this point, I mean, I did okay, but I was definitely starting to fall into irritated child rather than staying an adult just
Okay.
because of some of the passive aggressive remarks. I wanted to just kind of be like, yeah, you know, you live in the moldy house. I don't care.
Yeah,
You know, I'm
right,
leaving. Bye.
right.
Like that's
Why
kind of,
now I'm well, and this is actually when you start feeling that, that is the opportunity for you to go back to the beginning and say, "Okay, so, um, let's review why I'm here."
yeah.
And and then you look straight at the guy and say, "Your daughter has recently given you a granddaughter, and they're worried that this granddaughter is going to get asthma living in a house that has mold and mildew. And I'm not sure if everybody's on the same page. It feels like you might not be. Your wife is, and I'm pretty sure that your daughter and son-in-law also are on that page.
Hmm.
So I was called in to come up with some ideas and also to help explain why this problem exists. And the fact that you did this French drain and a lot of work outside probably did help quite a bit, but it wasn't enough. And a big problem that most houses have is they've got moisture coming up out of the soil, and that's going to happen whether you got French drains or not if you don't have some type of a moisture barrier. And one way to treat that is by dehumidification. Pressurization can sometimes also help. Filtration is great because what you're not able to stop, you can hopefully filter out. So
Yeah.
this is where I've come in, and these are some of the ideas I'm going to bring, and I'll explain them to in better. So
Yeah.
that's just sort of to bring all the any newbies that might
Yeah.
watch this.
Yeah. I should have done that. And there was, I mean,
Oh, well, it's easy. It's easy
yeah.
when you're not on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that and especially, I mean, I kind of one of the things that I immediately like going down the road after I left, uh, things that were popping up in my mind. I was like, you know, I should have stopped and went, hold on a second, let's slow
Okay.
down. You know, it feels like we're all on different pages. Um, is it worth it to even proceed? maybe just like draw like, hey, like husband, look at him, and be like, do you feel like it's even worth it to proceed from now? Would you feel better if I just gave you your money back on this comfort consult? I take back this report and we just don't go any further, and just you know kind of put something into play to where it's like, okay, either we're gonna have to get on the same page, or we're not gonna go any further from here. Like kind of establish again, like what you said of, why am I here to begin with? Like, why am I here? And is this important? Is the house that your daughter and grandkid live in, is it important that it has really high moisture levels to the point that your linen closet, you can't keep towels in it because the towels stay damp? Is that a concern? Because if it's not a concern, I shouldn't have been here. I shouldn't be here. But uh, the whole time, instead of kind of like stepping back and going, hold on, let's establish why I'm here, what's what's taking place, what's the actual goals again. Uh, I kept trying to, which I was kind of pulling myself back a couple of times because I started to lean too much into the over explaining and like trying
Right.
to explain the problems away. And I caught myself a couple of times doing that and had to stop and go, hold on, I need to ask a question here. Let me get them talking.
Okay.
But but I mean, I did explain uh the situation and the problems to her well. And um I mean, I think she understood. The only problem is I don't think, since she didn't give the budget, and I don't think, and
He
since she
wasn't
hadn't
committed
read
to the
yeah,
repair.
yeah, and she didn't read the report when I
Mhm.
was going over these things, I unknowingly just kind of breezed over some things that she
Mhm.
hadn't even looked at yet because I didn't know. I thought we was re going over some points before I realized, oh no, this is all new to her because she didn't read it. So there was things that I, you know, to had been more effective, I should have, you know, uh,
But they lied to you a bunch of times, it sounds like.
e- yes, I mean, definitely so, definitely.
And so it wasn't that you didn't ask, "Hey, did you read the what to expect email? Hey, did you look at the videos? Hey, did you read your comfort consult report?" You know,
Yeah,
a lot of this, I guess, to some extent. I mean, I think the what to expect email sort of gets you to the point where I guess I'm just trying to see to work through. It's clear what you could have done differently, but is there something that the process could have done differently that would have done a better job of protecting you?
um, I, I mean, I do think there was probably little nitpicky things of like, um, of kind of being a lot more explicit with certain. I think there, well, I'm trying to think how to best explain it. I think really the root issue here was that the prospecting was it done right? Like this is one that probably it should have never happened to begin with, first of all.
Right. Right,
And
because
so
of the
then
way it was referred in.
yeah, and then second of all, I think because of that, it promoted people doing things that was very different than what typically happens at a comfort consult. They kind of exposed little things within the process that could be improved, but
These
even with
people
those
had magical expectations.
yeah. And
They
it but
they thought you were gonna magically solve these problems.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, I really
they weren't ready for a comfort consult. They're
yeah,
not,
no,
you
no.
know
Absolutely. It should have been a free quote, and this is why I'm changing the way that I'm handling these of requiring the free quote first and then converting to a
Oh,
comfort
this is a
consult when needed.
great example of why free quote should be first.
Yes, because the recommendations that I gave, I mean, that's something that you can give that to any house.
Yeah, you didn't need a blower door for that.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, the blower door just verified, is the house just out like, completely uncontrollable, and then it kind of then lessened the likelihood of odds for this particular scenario. But
Oh,
still, with the
it was a
because
bad
that
number.
yeah, well, The probabilities of fixing it wasn't the problem. The recommendations wasn't the problem. Really, what it came down to, what the problem was their expectations, uh, people not seeing certain things that they needed to see, and then the price.
Right.
So I don't know what they're, because really a good question that should have been asked for this particular situation before we done it would have been, what are you expecting to spend here? What do you think this is going to cost? Because if you think it's going to be $1,000, spending $500 may not be worth it to you, because it's probably just going to tell you things to do that you're not going to want to do anyways.
Right. Right.
So some form of
If
prospecting there, because that
okay.
I didn't really do that, just because I falsely assumed there was going to be some pre-known things, because the referral is someone who I know, they're very privy to like the cost of things, how much these types of things are going to cost, that it's going to require, and some, potential like dehumidifiers, and that was probably something that was probably already well known, and I know that she already knows roughly what those types of things cost. So I uh, poorly assumed that there was going to be some form of like, that being known of some sort, but I was wrong, and
Okay.
there should have been, and I should have kind of prospected that out a little bit more before I sold straight to the comfort consult, or I should have just did a free quote to begin with, and then I could have prospect the comfort consult during the free quote, and then given the same quotes to find out that, oh, this is outside of our budget, we didn't care, this, we don't care about this that much, and then I could have went on with,
It could have been, well, nice meeting you.
an
Let me know if you need help.
yes, yes, that's what it could have been.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah,
Unfortunately, the free quote doesn't have the ability to provide you with the nice report that would have tied that into a nice little bow for you.
yeah, yeah,
So, which dovetails really nicely into this other thing that we got here and conversation that I had with Reedie tonight. But why don't you go ahead and finish with the story, and then we'll go over to the questionnaire and go
okay,
through
yeah.
some other
Well,
stuff.
there's not a whole lot left to it. It basically, after leaving that follow-up report, that's what uh, it stayed there. Um,
Well, you and I put together a
yeah, well,
response, right?
yeah, that's what I was looking it up real quick so I can read off basically what they had said. So then the follow-up was, and again, remember, I built the recommendations around this $10,000 budget that I was given
Right.
at the comfort consult that she wasn't at. And so
Right.
she's now responding to me with, um, getting
Um,
back to you about our rental house. I definitely can't do the fresh air or the filtration packages. Those were the around $10,000 range. That was the 9,500 and the 11,000 options.
mhm.
Uh, but it is just out of my but it is just out of my budget. I wasn't prepared for the cost of 10,000. And I also want to pause here. Again, this is where another lie had took place, because after I did the comfort consult, I called her on the phone to also kind of retouch base with her to be like, here's what I did. Here's a few bullet points of information that I had
That I went over
done.
with your husband in
Yeah.
case
And I
he
just want,
doesn't, because you already probably had a sense that he wasn't going to be telling her much.
yes. And so I was kind of just wanting to, there's a few things I was wanting to hit on. Uh, the goals. Like, what, you tell me exactly what you're wanting from me.
Hmm.
B, the budget of going, and just so you know, he gave me a $10,000 budget. Uh, I'm going to build recommendations around that. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. And what else? There was a few other things I'm trying to remember. There were some things that they had mentioned that, the DIY option, because I was told at the comfort consult, uh, as many things DIY as I could include, the better. So then I was wanting to touch base on that and go, and just so you know, when I'm putting these quotes together, I'm assuming as much DIY as I can. And so was kind of touching base on that. So that phone call took place before the report delivery, and before uh, the follow up visit, and before this message. So then I'm being told I wasn't prepared for the cost of 10,000. Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
You were
uh,
prepared for that, but
yeah,
apparently you're totally a dumb shit.
yeah. And then the next sentence is, uh, I know it needs it, but after the 3K in DIY and the 7K for just the whole home dehumidifier, it would be 10,000. So it's like, okay. And then it says, I'm going to get a couple more estimates for just the whole home dehumidifier package. I was also wondering how much of the $7,600 is labor because it looks like the cost of the system is around 2,000. I know there are other parts and materials involved in your estimate, but it doesn't really break down the 7K except for the retrofit, which the retrofit was like a retro commission, basically recommissioning the HVAC system to work with whatever packages that was installed. And then it says, I appreciate your time in helping us understand how cooling, heating, sealing, and in a home works. I will let you know if we're interested in the dehumidifier package after I gather more estimates. But for now, uh, put my potential order on hold. Thanks again. So it was a typical price objection and a few. And the reason it feels extremely disingenuous is if there hadn't been a price objection in that, I would probably be like, okay, maybe there's some things that just was like misunderstood. But
Mhm.
if you knew what the budget was, you gave me the budget, you okayed the budget. Uh, I deliver based on this budget, and I do as much DIY as possible. And then now you're saying that that's a problem. But then along with that, you're also saying that why is it $7,600? Blah blah blah.
Right.
And so it's like, you know, it's one of those things that's like, oh,
I think
in
we came up
hindsight,
with a pretty good response, didn't we?
yes. And so my response, and I'll just read it off in one go without stopping, was I'm sorry about that. Your husband gave me that budget to build a plan around, and I should have reviewed it and confirmed that more thoroughly with you and all the information that I was working with. Aside from the 5% member discount, that is unfortunately the cost. Wait, no, aside from the 5% membership discount, side note, I have a membership program. If you're a member, you get 5% off installs. And so I'm just saying, aside from the 5% discount for members, the cost to properly install, commission, and tune the equipment to function properly, that's just what it costs. Uh, there can be cheaper methods and options, but it requires cutting corners that tend to cause issues and tend to cause issues from my experience. For your question on price, there are a lot of factors, labor being one. Did you have a specific concern with it? And she just replied with, no, was just curious. I'll let you know if we decide to do anything, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So,
So you
so then
didn't
I
want
just,
her to let her provide the dehumidifier and you
no,
do the install.
no,
Okay.
I didn't. I thought about it. I was about to, but I decided against it because honestly, it just seemed like it was too likely to be a headache if something didn't go just perfectly to plan. And just didn't want to get because I could see that something mean where they're like, oh, we can get this dehumidifier for cheap. They get some,
It's
like
missing a part or
yeah, something that's already messed
it
up.
doesn't
It's some cheap
operate
unit.
and then
Yeah,
you go and try and get paid while it's installed. The getting it to operate is on you and have them be mad at you for some
yeah,
right.
yeah, something like that. So the follow up to her question, I basically just said, okay, well, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to mark this as declined. And in the future, if you need anything from me, I can requote this, but just know the price may change because because this quote will no longer be valid.
Right.
And she said, okay. So I was like, good. I want to mark this as a loss and move on.
Right. Right. I think that, you know, so there's a lot going on, particularly the the people writing the check aren't necessarily the people with the pain.
Yes.
And that's always going to be problematic because particularly in a situation like this, you got grandma and grandpa who probably want to pretend that this is a lot more painful to them than it actually is. And
Yeah.
they've also probably spent $15,000 or $20,000 trying to get this house sorted already. And so you got a lot of sort of under the surface frustration going on there. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know how, like, I don't know that there was a sale here. Even if you
I
had done it where
yeah.
you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's.
Yeah. I don't think there was either, really. I think again it falls back to as a prospecting issue.
Yeah,
It should have
and using the free, as you suggested, using the free
yes.
quote process would have avoided the go back.
Yes. That's what should have happened. Um Now, I will say I am glad that it did happen just because it did flesh out some issue. I think had I had prospected it properly, and let's take it wasn't them, it was a different scenario. Same situation of the problems, but like a different scenario in terms of who lives there, the people and whatnot. I think those the missing things that where I messed up, I think I could have still made those same mistakes, yet still made a sale, and I wouldn't have recognized those problems had it not been those people. So I mean, I do think there was benefits there because I did, you know,
Right, because
learn some
you
things.
got a lot of learning out of it as opposed to just
Yes.
not making a sale.
Yes. So, and I mean, like, I guess the good thing is I mean, I wasn't there for free. I mean, I did make $450 off of it. It's just yeah, the amount of time that I spent on it probably wasn't really worth
You would have
the
rather spend it on a
$450.
free quote and not got paid.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's just, it wasn't just terrible into the world, whatever, but
Mhm.
I wouldn't choose to do that again.
Gotcha.
But I guess that kind of then rolls us on into now for
Well,
the
so
free
I talked to
quote.
Reedie, and Reedie is, so Reedie's still at, he did, what did he say? 18 leads, over 200,000 in sales, um,
Oh, wow.
72% closing rate. So he's still very happy with the free quote process. And he is feeling that the report is missing a lot of the things that the comfort consult provides when it comes to responsibly avoiding responsibility, which sort of requires a better job of explaining what happened at the visit, because that's what the comfort consult report does, is it explains what happened at the visit. And then the difference in the comfort consult report is it's doing load calcs and other things that are based on diagnostics, whereas the free quote, the only real diagnostic is optional, and that's the static pressure.
Yeah.
So, but I think the observations and recommendations of things to consider, um, I think we get that sorted out, and then it ends up being an easier thing, easier value for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I think, I mean, I guess really it kind of comes down to like really laying out exactly what is the free quote meant to illustrate. And, you know, I guess it wouldn't be a bad idea probably to sit down and write out exactly what it's needed in words and then go, okay, of these words, what can be projected with, pictures, diagrams, and graphics and work that way. because there are things in the free quote report that it does, give information really well, like the reiterating on the 4 questions. It gives a good visual of here's a visual representation of what you told me of the condition that your house is currently,
And how you feel about it.
and how you feel about it. Then there's the likely load range that illustrates where the safe zone is going to be in choosing equipment size without knowing for sure. Uh, and then the next visuals are going to be actually the static pressure will be next. The static pressure perfectly, but if they've watched the video, it'll visualize the current health of the system, duct pressure wise, and
Tying back to likely load and
yes,
saying, because of your static, you really do need to lean into the green unless you're comfortable putting yourself at risk of $10,000 or $15,000 for new ductwork.
yes, and then on the last portion is going to be the options of install options and the equipment options of visualizing the difference in the different options and then putting together that ideal specification that they tell you. So then you can go, here's the specification that you told me that works best for you.
And so one of the things that Eric said is that might be a tear sheet. And so that might be
A tear
like
sheet.
a 5th page, like a page unto itself. Here's your
Okay.
ideal specification.
Okay. I see what
And
you
as
mean. Yeah.
part of the ideal specification, it's gonna have just the column or just the items chosen out of the install category, different categories, and then just the equipment on the equipment decision. And then it's also going to show the size they chose on likely load range.
Yeah. I think.
So all of those things will be in the final page. So it's going to be kind of repeated.
Hmm.
This is the worksheet that allowed us to come up with this, and this is what we came up with. And then on top of that, we talked about potentially in footnotes having the questions and answers that occur in the questionnaire, which I'm sort of scrolling through right here. Here's Testy McTestface's questionnaire that we did back in December, I guess. And one of the things that'll happen here is so for example, there might be check marks next to these questions or some of the questions, and that'll allow you guys to put a check mark next to a question that you want to have show up in footnotes.
What about, I just now thought about this. So, like, if the report is meant to just kind of summarize the visit and be like, here's everything that we've went over,
Mhm.
what if it started with it starts with the 4 questions of like showing that,
Or the one question.
or the one question. Well, or really, yeah,
The one
I guess
question
all
is
of
the
them.
place
The
to
one,
start.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one question, and then the 4, and then under that have a section that's just kind of reiterating the the questionnaire. And so, like within the questionnaire, if you ask a question and you get an actual like good response on something, have a checkbox or something that you check it, and then that populates under here. And I don't know what you could call the section. Maybe it's just here's what you told me.
Additional questions
Yeah, it's like
or
here's what you told me.
additional
It's like
concerns.
to this question you told me this. To this question you told me this, and it just re-hits on everything that they told you. And
Mhm.
then right after that's then probably a good spot for probably static pressure, really, and be like, okay, and
Well,
then we check.
so the way I've been thinking about it is after the questionnaire is the 6 functions and then the static pressure. No, I'm sorry.
Well,
The 6 functions, then likely load range, and then static pressure.
um, hmm.
So it's
Well,
comfort quiz, the one question, comfort quiz, and then all of these questions here. And then 6 functions, and then tying the 6 functions to the 4 questions quiz. You know, typically the most common thing we see is temperature imbalance. So we'll talk about, you know, mixing and load matching so that you're able to re-hit on, well, if you get this sizing right, your equipment will run longer and lower. And so if
mhm.
you don't have good mixing and matching, then getting smaller equipment will help. And then on top of that, if you get smaller equipment that has multi-stage or preferably 5-stage, there's a really good chance we don't have you short cycling on mild days.
Yeah.
And then you go to the likely load range, because after all of that conversation, so what is the right load? Well, what we find is houses of this size typically have equipment of this size. And some of the equipment is just perfect and it's a good house. Some of the equipment's a little bit oversized and or it's a bad house. And then some of the equipment is grossly oversized, and whether it's a terrible house or not, it just doesn't work. And if you grossly oversize your equipment for a small house, you're going to have all kinds of short cycling issues in any part of the house that isn't totally connected to outdoors. And the parts that are totally connected to outdoors aren't going to get comfortable no matter what equipment you put in.
Yeah.
So you really, like, if you've got a basket case house, you're going to want to fix it if you want to get control of your 4 questions quiz complaints. And again, going back to the 6 functions, those 6 functions help you understand how better HVAC equipment is going to do a better job of solving those comfort complaints. And on top of that, you can't just fix it with equipment. It's got to be the right size. And that's where we go with the static pressure, because it doesn't matter what kind of load calc we get if your equipment's too big for your ductwork. So you're going to really need to size to your ductwork, and the likely load range just tells us if you're one of the few people that isn't going to get away with sizing to the ductwork, because the ductwork is so deficient, you really need to spend some money improving your ductwork. And then, so do you want us to take your static pressure so we can get a sense of whether or not your duct will at least match the equipment in the green?
Yeah.
And then once you get the size picked out, now we can talk about the different matrices. The first matrix is different things that you might want to improve your installation. And then the next matrix is learning and understanding the different types of equipment. And then once you understand both of those things, you can start picking. And once you start picking, the stuff that you pick is going to go down to your tear sheet.
Yeah.
And we'll take notes on the whys behind why you picked stuff. Because a lot of times what it is people pick the best equipment they can afford. And so the only reason they're not getting the best equipment is they can't afford the best equipment. Particularly if they got comfort complaints. that they're hoping to solve. So I think that's sort of the order. Do you think you'd
Yeah.
like to see it different?
The only thing that I was thinking in like for the report in terms of ordering is likely load range and static pressure, the order on that, because if really your static pressure is going to influence the direction that they're going to be tending to lean anyways. And so, I mean, I could see the case either way, but I guess my mind immediately just kind of went to having static pressure being before likely load range. So then it's kind of like going into likely load range of them being prepared that, hey, uh, static pressure is high.
If you pick this equipment, it's not going
Yeah,
to be a match.
yeah. Like they need to, like I guess, seeing likely load range, they need to see the red as being that means I'm going to be exactly the same with brand new equipment as that up there says, which is high duct pressure. And so
Right.
kind of preconditioning that and dependent on,
Well,
you
I'm
know,
okay with changing the order of the report, um, because I don't think the report needs to be in the exact order of the visit.
yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, I
A-
don't,
and I don't want to change the. We move the static pressure to the bottom for a reason, and I
mhm.
still like that reason. I'm still pretty confident that it's sort of the Hail Mary reason, and it also ends up you don't want to start off a new visit with people scaring them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the visit and for the questionnaire, absolutely. I
Okay.
definitely agree.
Like
It's
the
just
order.
I'm just thinking on the report of,
Okay.
kind of. I mean, with the report, the whole point is to
I
reconvey what
thought
you've already told
I
them.
thought you guys would come back wanting a different order in the report from the visit. I thought that might be a possibility, and the
uh,
argument that you're making
yeah,
feels feels reasonable.
yeah,
Start
and
out right at look, this is the worst part of your news, and I wanna make sure that
yeah,
if you don't read the rest of this, you see this.
yeah, yeah. Well, it also kind of keeps it in the same Sandler submarine. Like the report is going to go from compartment to compartment. It's,
Right.
it's pain, 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 moving on to, okay,
By the
here's the
way,
problems.
that's static.
Yeah. Here's here's your pain. Uh, Here are things that's going to contribute to your pain. And then here are some options for if you want to alleviate said pain and why. And so kind of keeping it there. And plus, dependent on the type of visit you're doing, because there's going to be a lot of free quotes that I'll do where I've already been to the house maybe several times before, and so I know going into the free quote of, hey, you've got a 4-ton unit that's doing 2.5 tons of cooling because I've already tested, I already know what it's
Right,
doing.
right.
So re-hitting on that, in the order of that also kind of helps in those situations where there to where it's like again hits on that pain and then it gets to the static pressure and it's like, hey, this is a problem. Remember that airflow problem we talked about? This
Well,
is how
you're
bad it
bringing
is.
up something else. Um, this report isn't just for them, it's kind of for you. So part of that is when you pull up the report, what are the things that you're going to want to see first?
Hmm.
So that you can have you're like they call you and want to have a conversation with you and you're like, "Oh, I don't remember." And you
Yeah.
pull up that report, you don't want to be scrolling down
Hmm.
for the top for the most important bits.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Which,
So that is something to be considering also.
yeah. And which I guess here's another, Ochi. I wrote down this other question before we started, uh, just because I thought this might be something that uh, may come up that kind of has an idea, and I think it kind of falls in here as well because I started kind of touching on it of like, you know, well, there's the whole idea of obviously uh, sell first, educate later in Sandler, and so there's this dichotomy of what to how much education to do up front before like there's certain amount of education needed for decision making, but then there is education that might not necessarily be crucial. And so the question would be, okay, what would be some aspects within this that's worth talking about and educating on now versus after the sale?
Are you talking about operation? How to operate the equipment or settings or?
Sorry about that. Well, just like the line of, I guess, just talking too much.
Hmm.
Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. So, like, avoiding the like rabbit holes of, there's there is your system is high static pressure, right? But then it's easy to start to go down the rabbit hole of uh, like if the static pressure's high, so if we downsize to this to let's go from a 4 ton to a 3 ton, that should get us around this range. And then if we do a new return enlarged return, it should drop it down to here. And it's like there's this, over educating on, like, you're talking too much, talking too
Oh,
much
oh,
details on the
yeah,
thing where it's like really you
right,
should just be like, your static pressure is high, and if we do these things, we can bring this down. Period.
right, right. You don't want to a la carte the better return on a great
Yeah.
piece of equipment. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is just what you get when you get this equipment. You get a great return
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
know that it's going to get, you know, it's going to take us much further into a safety zone where we don't have a whistling filter.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like I guess it's just part of one of those things where when you're doing a lot of front end education, it's real easy to, it's easy like when you're talking about better humidity control, you know, like sliding into, well, humidity plays into comfort, it plays into like mold growth. And also, if you have like, if you've got spray foam, well, then it can cause, the VOCs to off gas faster. And it's like this rabbit hole that you just fall down into really quickly when all you should have really said was, yeah, this type of equipment offers better humidity control. And for durability of the house and comfort, it's best to keep it below 50%.
Right.
Period. And so I just thought that was I guess, a good question to just think about when doing some of these things of going, when is too much too much? And I guess just really being cognizant of that, of going, what information is critical and has to be known right now to make a decision, and what information is a nice to know after the sale's done, after the install's completed. Because then you can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Right, right. You don't wanna go full home performance bonehead and have them glaze over.
Yeah, and
So
and
we're
it's a
gonna have to be careful with the report. That's one of the things I think Eric was suggesting check marks next to the questions. Um,
yeah.
like a lot of these questions are just teeing you up. They're sort of contract questions.
Yeah.
So you're getting to the point where and really all I've done here is in red, I think I've either added or edited for, flow, what was already there. And I've put all this into this Google Doc um, because this is what I'd like to see be a primary edit when Eric goes through this again. And one of the reasons I was asking everybody to go in and look at this is so that they could make edits anywhere they think
Yeah, which really, I mean, what you have here, I looked through it and I mean, it looks because it's not grossly different than what it was
Mhm.
before, but really, like you said, moving the static pressure to the end, uh, and I mean, that's probably the biggest difference, really.
So this is where I move the duct pressure.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing in the report, we'll have links to those videos so that
Mhm.
people can rewatch those videos.
Yeah.
So this would be after all of the questions. So this is after the comfort quiz and then all of sort of the contract questions to make sure that you're on the same page. And getting a little bit more, getting to know a little bit more about them. So 6 functions. And then I think there needs to be some visual here, like a half a page that sort of lists the 6 functions.
Yeah.
So maybe
That's
I'll
what I was
go drop that in there.
that's what I was about to say. I wonder if we need like a graphic that
Yeah.
kinda breaks down the 6 functions and what they mean very concisely, to have
Mhm.
it there and to have it in the report around, the options.
So questionnaires really not all that bad. I guess you do have to jump out and go do measurements. And so there's the measurement section.
Yeah.
Um,
Which let me
and then up here is some conversation about, narrative. You're talking to people on the phone
Mhm.
and talking to them about, you know, deciding whether or not they want your help building their ideal equipment replacement specification. The 3 ways we could do a quote. Well, my brother, thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Feels like this was a good one. I feel like we covered some good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for coming because summertime, nobody wants to be doing this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why we're doing it bi-weekly, so
Yeah, right. It does make it easier. It makes it a lot
yeah,
easier.
that it does.
All right.
Well well, thanks everybody for coming out and watching. We will see y'all again in 2 weeks.